This is the Wally and Methot Show. Now here are your hosts, Brent Wallace and Marc Methot.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Brent Wallace. He's former NHL defenseman Marc Methot. And this is our very first Wally and Methot Sens spectacular season finale super show, Meth?
Yeah, I mean, call it whatever you want. I'm just pumped for it. So let's get this thing rocking.
All right, well, let's just call it the Sens Spectacular, brought to you by BEI, Bonisher Excavating. They are helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Okay, and Beth, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, do you like the t-shirt?
Oh, it's embarrassing, man. I don't even know what to say. Whatever. You like well done meat. It's a shame, but here we are. I'm going to bring you over here in the summer, hopefully when the lockdown measures loosen up a little bit more and I'm allowed to have people over. And I'm going to teach you on my barbecue how to properly cook a steak.
Well, my wife isn't going to let me touch our barbecue, but I'll come over and cook it over there, I guess. And I believe well done can serve multi things. So it's not necessarily just for steak, but I quite like it. Also, you can order hashtag Absolute Pigeon. We've got a couple of things. This is our very own Wally Methot t-shirt line. Of course, we have a mug as well. You can go to shop.wallyandmethot.com to order yours today. Hey, by the way, you can get free curbside pickup. All right. So, Matt, today we're going to mix up some things, and that is we're taking out the headlines. And that's because for our Sens super duper spectacular season finale show, we are going to bring in two of the big heavy hitters in the Ottawa sports media who cover the Senators, and that is Shawn Simpson from TSN 1200, and of course, our very own good friend, the Athletics' Ian Mendes. Both, by the way, used to have worked together for nearly over half a decade on the radio station as they partnered up for the afternoon drive. So we're all going to chat some sports and some hockey, and we're going to delve into the Ottawa Senators in this past season and what went right, what went wrong. So without further ado, we're just going to get to that quickly. Also on the show, we have got sports interaction. We're going to lay down some bets here on our Stanley Cup predictions. And we've got Trivial Trivia, where we're going to give away a t-shirt and a mug from the Wally and Methot shop. So let's just get right to it, shall we? Coming up after the break in the Whitewater Brewing chat, brought to you by Whitewater Brewing. Of course, they are brewed by friends, for friends, and we're going to bring in Ian and Shawn to chat some hockey. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the Wally and Methot Show. Time now for the chat, quenched by Whitewater Brewing. From blonde ales to New England IPAs, Whitewater beer is brewed by friends, for friends, available at the LCBO licensed grocers and shopwhitewater.ca. And of course, if you go to whitewater.ca, there is an exclusive Wally Methot coupon to get 15% off. Shop whitewater.ca. Must be 19 years of age or older. Yeah. So nice. As promised, we are joined by one of the greatest dynamic duos ever in Ottawa history. Probably better than Heatley and Spets, if you ask me. It's Ian Mendes and Shawn Simpson, who spent half a decade together on the radio. Guys, welcome to the show. I appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah. Sorry. What was that code? Yeah. What was that code? Wally and Methot?
Yes. Okay. At shopwhitewater.ca.
Okay. We never had a code. It is as highly successful as Simmer and Mendes was. We never had a code with anybody to get 15% off of anything.
Yeah. All the endorsements went to Mendes, so the code was just Ian.
More people probably drink watching our show, so that's probably why. But let's get right to it. On our Sens spectacular season finale, we want to get to the season, break it all down. So let's start right now with the season finale game and what your guys' thoughts were on ending this game in overtime, beating the Toronto Maple Leafs, keeping them, I think, from winning the President's Trophy. Simmer, are you as excited for next season as everybody else that seems to be inside the Greenbelt?
Wally, a little different for me. Again, not that I'm not a fan, not that I don't want them to do well, but I don't get caught up the same way. And all the stuff about we win the last one, it's going to carry over. Opening day of camp, interview the guys. Do you remember who you played last game of the year? No. Now, the play down the stretch, the play of the young players, without a doubt. And when you look at the future of the team, the way the season started, all the older players that came in to babysit got in the way. So the emergence of the young players, the finish they have, and if you remove the first 15 games of this year, guys, you look at the previous three, you look at the way the season ended, Belleville drafting, this is the way you do a rebuild. So absolutely, if you're a Sens fan and from covering them, hey, is it a lot more fun, as you guys all know, when they're winning for sure? So I'm excited for next year, absolutely. And it's not a false sense. I mean, that's the best part. It's not next year, let's get in and maybe we can win. they're building towards something very special. So I think anybody involved, including us covering, has to be excited.
Mendes, what are your thoughts on this season as it wraps up? I mean, Ottawa finished almost, I think, with 10 wins in the last 14 games. You can look at their numbers. They're really good. It says, hey, this is a playoff team, but really, is it just a team playing out the string that's winning some games here with no pressure?
Well, first of all, Wally, I got to say that being in the building on Wednesday night was the first time I ever watched the Senators blow a third period lead to the Leafs in the month of May. And I was like, who cares? Like, you and I have sat in that building and watched a whole bunch of playoff debacles against the Leafs in the month of May. It does feel different though, right? Like it does. There's a totally, I know some people will say these were meaningless wins, but here's the thing. And I'm sure Meth will talk about this and Simmer will talk about this. There needed to be a change in the culture in the room. And I think winning 9 of 12 games, you've brought a winning culture in there. And Brady Tkachuk has never played a meaningful game. Thomas Chabot has never played a meaningful game. And I think if you had finished this season 30th overall again, you're starting to trend towards Buffalo Sabres territory, which is, it's a bad culture. Like you can't win. And that's what they've been able to do. So that's where I think there's a little bit of reason for optimism. As you guys know, if you just keep perpetually losing, it becomes an organizational thing. And now it feels like you've turned a corner.
So here's did they massively mess up and misread the start of this season when they brought in all the veterans? They were just trying to plug holes and they were trying to do it on a budget. Meth, was this the wrong approach they took? Were they unprepared for the start of this year?
That's a tough call because when you're building this team, you can't expect to have the output that you had. It's an impossible prediction to make, right? I mean, to expect Norris to lead the charge up front as your number one center with the assignments that he's having every other night. I mean, you can't predict that. So, I mean, I could sit here and pretend like that was the wrong play early on. I wasn't a huge fan of some of the signings to begin with. I will admit that. I know some of them, maybe not the fleetest of foot on the back end that they picked up. And of course, as we all know in today's NHL, you need to be able to skate. You got to keep up. I mean, you can be a wily old savvy vet, but if you can't move your feet, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And certainly that was true in the North Division this year. So for me, I mean, it's been like a lot like Simmer and Ian just mentioned. There's two sides to this coin right now. And it's that I don't want to put too much weight onto this last stretch because the games don't mean a whole lot. And players tend to play very well sometimes under those circumstances, especially with a younger group. There's less pressure on you going to the rink. So I'm curious to see what this is going to look like next year with these heightened and elevated expectation levels on the guys, right? So to me, again, good takeaway, like Ian mentioned, I'm like a bit of both with these two guys here. Good takeaway from the last stretch. You've got an opportunity for your young guys to develop a winning culture and develop and hopefully carry that into next year. But at the same time, you know, the games don't mean a whole lot. So I'm sort of on the fence here.
The fence-sitting Methot strikes again. All right, Simmer, so you've gone through this in an organizational build as an assistant GM. You understand. So is this team a playoff team next season, or is there going to be more growing pains that people aren't really prepared for that may start the way next season?
Well, you should be prepared for it, but they're not a lock to make the playoffs. And a little bit of this, little of that. What division are they going to be in? What do the other teams look like? You know, until you get into that, Wally, and you examine, hey, if they get Matt Murray, $7 million goaltender, the defense is solidified up front, they're fine. They'll be competitive, but don't lock it in. Are you making forward steps? Absolutely you are. That's the interesting part of now finally, and this is where it's very different. You now have expectations coming into the year. And I think we'd all agree, based on some hits and some misses, the first 20 games for the franchise, I've got to imagine the owners watching the coach and the general manager, they got to get off to a good start. So there's pressure on them. And I think you have to put pressure on the players, but not the negative pressure. Just, hey, let's hire some expectations here. We don't have to make the playoffs, but you got to have some forward progress without a doubt. And that's really the key part for the organization. How that looks, well, that's interesting. I don't expect Norris and Batherson necessarily to be as good as they were this year. I don't know if Stützle is going to take another step. There's a lot of pieces here that we know that sophomore year, that second year, that third year, it's a long path. What we do know is that they've got pieces in place, if handled properly, if augmented. And back to Meth's point at the start of the season, hey, you go into every year and you say to yourself, okay, based on the American Hockey League, it is your job as management to project players. But I agree on Norris. But what was interesting, they brought players in that quite simply couldn't play. So almost by default, you had to play the young players, but they did emerge and they were successful. So it is forward progress. How you quantify that, how it is, You just have to continue to get better. And I think they will do that. As to what division and where they finish next year, as I said, I just hope that they're chasing a playoff spot.
Mendes, let's start with you on this one. And that is, which Brown got the most attention this season? Connor, Josh, Logan.
Or Dean.
Yeah.
Dean. I feel so bad now. Yeah.
No, I think running away, it's Connor Brown, isn't it? I think this was one of the best all-around seasons an Ottawa player has had in recent memory. 21 goals, a number of shorthanded goals, some great defensive metrics. I think it's Connor Brown. I think it's funny when he signed that contract for whatever it was, $3.5 million. I think there was a lot of people thinking, that's a touch high for a role player, bottom six. He has leapfrogged Evgeny Dadonov. He is a top 6 forward on this team, and he's pretty productive. So I would say it's Connor Brown, and it's not even close.
Yeah. And Dadonov isn't easy to jump over, guys. He's kind of small and rotund. So that in itself is quite an accomplishment. I would argue Logan Brown got the most attention. It was negative. The Brown guy as well, the defenseman, Josh, he scored the winning goal on a broken leg, which to me is actually pretty impressive as well. So very close, but I'm having fun with it, Ian. Connor Brown, just super refreshing. And JR and I last year pumped his tires. We got him that contract. We got him the stick deal. It looked ugly early. It looked like Eric Condra 2.0. I can't believe, Meth, how much he improved during the year, where it wasn't Zach Smith. Like, he became a goal scorer. And I watched him last night, and I keep using your point about the World Championships, about even that little bit down the stretch where he's playing well. He was on another level last night where he feels like, you made that point about belonging. Man, he was the best player on the ice last night.
Yeah, and I worry, my only concern here, and you guys kind of touched on it a little bit, it's what's this group going to look like production-wise going into next year? So, and then that ties Brown right into that, right? It's like, is he going to score 21 goals? I hope so. I hope he can continue this production. But you got a lot of outliers here. You got a lot of guys that are going to be coming into their sophomore years. So I think what I'm basically trying to say is I would like everybody to just kind of take a deep breath and understand that there is still a lot of growth left in this group. And you can't expect all these kids to come back next year and just grow off this past year, because there's always going to be ups and downs. You hope that you keep trending that proper direction, and that, with added roles and responsibility in a longer year, and then possibly moving into that Atlantic division under that old format, you're starting to play against some really good teams now. It could get interesting. But again, I'm not trying to veer too far off here. I know Wally will kill me if I keep doing this. With Connor Brown, it's simple. I just hope with his work ethic and his positive attitude, he seems like a very likable guy in the room, that he can just continue this pace, because with those contracts being thrown around now, with Colin White coming in at 4.75 and Dadonov signing that $15 million deal, you're going to hope to God that some of these young kids can keep this up.
Well, Mendes already screwed up the question or the answer, because I asked who got the most headlines, not who was the best player. So let me go back, because Logan Brown, I believe, got the most headlines if I look it back up. So Simmer, you watched Logan Brown play in his one game this season, played 940, 0 shots, 0 hits, 1 giveaway. It was a very flat line. And you look at Parker Kelly playing in his first NHL game, gets a goal. He made stuff happen. So enough of this argument that Logan Brown needs to be put with better players in order to find out how he can play. So tell me what you thought of his game.
You know what? Better than I expected, Wally. I watched the Marlies game 10 days ago. They're playing Belleville, turnover machine, 1 speed, no strength. But he missed a whole year of hockey. He's had a back injury. I didn't expect anything different. And that was where I was surprised with the call-up. I thought, why put him in this spot? His pace was way better than I expected, made some plays, and Nisimov should have scored a goal right there. So I didn't mind it. My personal thought on him, I don't think you're selling if you're selling much right now. I'd protect him. I'd stay the course. I'd bring him back for another training camp, see where he ends up being. I don't know behind the scenes, everything else that's going on, injuries, fitness, all the other dynamics. But I do know the guy has talent. He's your asset. Continue to control it. So I got to say, in the small sample size yesterday, from what I saw 10 days ago, I was actually pleasantly surprised.
Mendes, do you keep him?
It's a tough one, right? Because my question is, what does the player think? Does the player want to change the scenery? That's what I'm starting to wonder about. And I look at this team and I think that the first line is set. I think Norris is going to start the season with Tkachuk and Batherson. But I think there's an opening in between Tim Stützle and Connor Brown on the second line. Is it Shane Pinto? I don't think it's Colin White. Do you go out and get somebody else, or do you give Logan Brown one last chance? And I said this the other day on the radio, and I'll say it again for your podcast listeners. The relationship between Logan Brown and the Ottawa Senators, it's like a cell phone that's on 1% battery and you've had to put it into airplane mode because you're like, it's on its last legs, but there's still a chance you can get back to full power. But I don't know. Like I just don't know. But he's fascinating. You need guys like Logan Brown to make podcasts and radio shows interesting. They're perfect polarizing guys.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add to that, Wally, though, and this is the part of the whole asset thing, it's taken on a life of its own because of where he's picked, all the dynamics, all the pushing. Who the hell cares? I don't care that he's 11th pick overall. Nobody has faulted him in the Ottawa Senators organization, the spot sitting there. And let's be honest, even with Josh Norris, coming into this year, an injury was part of it. Okay, going into next year, you're going to have to go against Tierney. You're going to have to go against White. You're going to have to go against Pinto. Go through the depth charts of the other 31 teams in the NHL, including the expansion Seattle Kraken. Who the hell does Logan Brown think he's sliding into and going to play ahead of? So if that's the information he's getting and the thought he's getting, I know Jeff Jackson quite well. I'd be sitting him down and saying, listen, I'm sure you went in that locker room last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It felt pretty good. You're in a pretty good spot here where there's still an opening. This idea that you're going somewhere else and that you're going to, I mean, I don't even know if he makes a National Hockey League team next year with the way he's played. So it's an interesting dynamic, but let's just get past any of the talk and go do the work, go get healthy, go earn a spot. And that's the way everybody else makes the National Hockey League.
I can't think of anybody in the 23 years I've been around this organization or so that has had the same kind of stuff written about or discussed or debated than Logan Brown and whether or not he's ever going to play in the NHL. Like, is anybody else come to mind?
Yeah. Was Brian Lee like that a little bit?
A little bit, but then he ended up playing enough games in the NHL where you're like, okay, so we can now move on. But there was, I just can't.
He was hurt a lot, wasn't he? Was Brian Lee always like getting injured during his developmental years? Yeah. So, I mean, there is a bit of a similarity there too. I think that's kind of the cycle, right? He starts to play well, gets hurt, back into that same cycle where, on the shelf, come back, struggles a little, finally starts to find his game, gets hurt. I just think at this point, it's totally up to the player. I mean, the organization's been catering to him every year. I mean, they're literally waiting to put him into the lineup, and it's just not working. It seems like there's a bit of a pace thing. Simmer, you've been watching him play way more than I have, but he just seems like he's missing a step in his game or like a little bit of an edge.
Yeah. He's right there when he's fine, and that's fine, but he has to stay healthy and do it. The rest will come. And I just wanted to circle back to your guys' point to kind of sum up next year, Wally. The part of, and this is the big part of a rebuild, if you had hit on Tierney, who I don't know what the hell happened to him, if you had maybe signed Toffoli instead of Dadonov, if you had hit on the White contract, imagine those three players at 55 to 60 points with Brown, with Paul, with your young players. That's the real part when you go into next year that may come up to bite this hockey team, is that you've got wrapped up, about $15 million on three guys that you don't even know what the hell you're going to get out of them next year.
Well, at least for the most part, Chris Tierney is reliable. He can play fourth line. He can play you 10 minutes. He can play PK for the most part. I suspect he will improve going into next year. However, what do you do with Dadonov on that side? Because it doesn't look like he's a top 6 player at the moment. That's a lot of money to put on a third line.
Well, and here's the thing on Dadonov. You paid him $3.5 million in real dollars this year. That's okay. In 2 years from now, it's $6 million in real cash. $6 million for a guy who had one power play point, and that was like in the third game of the season. Like, if I told you at the start of the year, Evgeny Dadonov would essentially play the whole year and it would have one power play assist, you'd be like, this is the worst season of any free agent ever. And it just happened. And I don't know that we've spent enough time on the fact that this guy was terrible on the power play. That was his own, like, it's like, that meme. It's like, you had one job. People are like, you had one job. Evgeny Dadonov, man, you had one job, which was come in and resuscitate a lifeless power play. And you had one assist in a game in January against Winnipeg. It's mind boggling to me.
What do you do with him, Simmer?
You know what, Wally, you don't do anything with him in a sense of, you hope. And again, I'll go through Matt Murray and most of the signings from last year. I was even saying Derek Stepan, great leader, played with his dad. Then he shows up. I'm like, holy crap, the guy's done.
He looks slow.
But in the case of Dadonov, I thought he was a real nice player. I knew he played with Huberdeau and Barkov, but I still looked and I remember thinking, this guy's better than Hoffman. I hope that based on COVID, I hope that on a long time, I hope that an off season here, whether it's a fitness issue, whatever it ends up being, I just hope there's a reset. Now, a little bit worried at 32 years old. but he was a whole different player. And that was one of the things coming in this year, guys, with all the time off, with the whole COVID world, anything you did from a trade acquisition standpoint or free agency, that guy walks into the room. I think for a lot of teams, you had no idea what to expect. I mean, hadn't watched him play, have no idea where their life is at. So let's hope for a reset. As far as what you're going to do with him, hey, he's around for the next 2 years. You just hope for the best.
Simmer, do you just find him maybe like an Olympic Russian doctor for the summer, and hopefully he bulks up and puts on 25 pounds?
You know what? I have no problem looking the other way. Maybe hang out with Vladdy Putin, maybe hang out with some other guys. Hey, I'm just going to look the other way. When he walks into the room and you don't even recognize him in a good way, hey, like I said, no worries. I don't think he's going to be playing the Olympics next year. Just do whatever you have to do to become the bumper on the power play again.
Good point. All right.
Let's move on, shall we? And that's DJ Smith took a lot of heat early on for this season of how he used his roster. All right, Mendes, let's assess his performance at now the end of the season.
Well, I think you give him a letter grade of a B. I think the team obviously seemed to respond to him at the end of the season. Should he have gone to Artem Zub earlier? Probably. Should he have gone to, given Norris and Batherson? There was a game against Winnipeg early in the year. Tkachuk, Norris, and Batherson were going all night. He stapled them to the bench for the final 5 minutes because he wanted the vets to hold the lead. And they blew the game and they lost in overtime. But he changed. So I'll give him some credit. He became flexible throughout the course of the year. He became a little bit more open-minded, but it's interesting. He goes into the last year of his contract, and I almost feel like either he's going to be a Jack Adams nominee or he's going to be looking for a new job. That's how I kind of feel. I feel like he has to take a step forward, and I'm not trying to put undue pressure on him, but that's how it feels. It feels like either they take a quantum leap or tangible leap forward and he's rewarded, or they regress or they stagnate and they're like, no, he's not the right guy. But he deserves one chance to coach this team with playoff expectations, and he's going to get it come October.
Simmer, what did you think of his performance? And again, we go back to the veterans that were brought in. He was kind of settled at the beginning of having to play these guys.
You know what, Wally? It's tough. I always joke around. I was a assistant GM at 29 years old. At 35, I finally figured out the job and I got fired. The guy I've coached 4 years as an assistant coach in the National Hockey League. He's now been 2 years as a head coach. He coached junior hockey his whole life. What I wonder behind the scenes of, first of all, kind of Pierre Dorion falling back to Boucher, bringing your own players now here with DJ Smith. From bringing in Zaitsev, who he coached, Zaitsev's played better, but who would have made that recommendation at $4.5 million? Coaches coach, scouts scout, players play. I look at some of this stuff and I wonder during training camp, when you're a coach on the bench, and I've never been a coach, but I've been around games, you have so much going on. At times trying to evaluate players. I worked with Glenn Hanlon. He'd ask me after the game, what the hell happened? He was worried the whole time about the matchups and everything else. Trying to evaluate players, I do wonder going back, who during training camp is the eye in the sky? And the fact that Pierre Dorion handed over the keys to him, you coach the team, you decide on the players. At some point, man, Wally, you sit down, you don't force anything, but as a manager, you start talking. Hey, I'm not so sure this Anisimov thing over White makes a whole lot of sense. It shouldn't be 10 games to get a Zub guy in. And from a tactical standpoint, he played Mike Babcock's system for the first part of the season, which nobody in the National Hockey League was playing. He won't play defensemen on their offside. He grew, he adjusted, he got better, he finished strong. He's a second-year coach. He's probably worse. So I actually applaud him. I think way too much was handed to him. And at the same time, people don't understand. He's trying to find his way as a coach, trying to evaluate personnel. But I do fault him on the tactical side. That was an absolute gong show along with the goaltending to start the year, end of the season. But he finished strong. And I'm sure he's a much better coach by the end of year two. And I'm excited for him. And I hope he's successful next year.
Meth, does he get a 3-year extension?
I mean, I would based off of the feeling that I get from the players, and it seems like they're very receptive to him. They seem, and I'll give DJ this. I mean, he's obviously a really good communicator. The guys love playing for him. That seems to be the theme whenever you hear from any of the guys. But I agree with everybody here. I mean, you guys make great points. He made adjustments throughout the year, and it worked out well. And I think, and we were talking about this earlier with Ian before Simmer came on. What a great situation organizationally wise going into the offseason, ending this way now. And I think it settles the media down. It settles the fan base down. Everyone's just a little happier now. There's less pressure on Pierre because they finished so strong. So they're all in a really good spot. I like what DJ brought to the group. I questioned some of the moves early on, but I don't know where that decision-making was coming from. Is that maybe Pierre pushing for certain players or vice versa, or maybe just too much responsibility on DJ? But again, he, like Ian just mentioned as well, he evolved, he adapted. And again, to me, the biggest indicator is the players enjoy playing for him. So you got to give him that.
Where do we go on the blue line? And I'm going to leave Meth out of this because I think you've talked about it enough. But is it just a top 4D? Is it just someone to play with Shabbat? Is it that bad a blue line? Can we have Erik Brannstrom in the season, on the team all year? Let's start. Mendes, what do you think of this blue line?
Okay, I look at the blue line opening night. I got 2 spots that I've got penciled in right now. Thomas Shabbat is my first pairing left defenseman. Artem Zub is my second pairing right defenseman. That's it. Everything else is up for negotiation. Who plays with Zub? Who plays with Shabbat? Where does Brannstrom fit in? Where does Methot fit in? Where does Zaitsev fit in? I don't know. They have to get a top 4 defenseman this summer. They have to. And somebody who can play 20 minutes a night. Is that a partner for Zub? I don't know. Is it a partner for Shabbat? Maybe. It's one of those things. But they got to do it. If they want to be a serious Stanley Cup playoff contender for next season, they have to get a 20-minute-a-night defenseman. And I think then after you get that player, then you can figure out where Brannstrom, Mete, Zaitsev kind of fit into the equation.
Simmer, what do you want to do?
Well, what do I want to do? I want to find that magical player. I want to Marc Methot. I said to JR, hey, free agent signings, who the hell is it? Trades. Oh, I want 20 minutes as well. Probably want a right shot. Probably want 6'3". Probably want beautiful like Marc Methot. Good in the community. Good in the room. Good with the guys on the road. But where am I going to find it? I'm betting right now that the defense for the Ottawa Senators in opening night is going to be Thomas Shabbat, Zaitsev. Zaitsev has played better. Coach loves him. He makes $4.5 million. What am I going to tuck him to the third spot on the right side? Brannstrom was a feature part of the Mark Stone trade. People are in love with him down the stretch. He's Zub. There's my top 4. But Josh Brown played the whole year with broken leg. He's going to end up being in the pairing as well. Now Mete's come in and played well. There's your top 6 guys. This mysterious player that's coming in.
Hold on a second.
And you know what? And with all the defense, when they went off after last year, how did that work out? I think they might even be a bit gun shy, Wally. I'd just be really surprised. I'll be quite honest with you. It's not a place on free agency. You blow your brains out. And from a trade standpoint, we're adding 10 more jobs with Seattle. Who are the players? Like I'm guessing that's going to be your opening night 6, and then hopefully Bernard Docker works his way in, and by next spring, Jake Sanderson is here.
So are we saying Erik Brannstrom's a top 4D right now? And I just watch him get pushed off the puck left and right. So someone just explained to me that Erik Brannstrom is a top 4D, and I'll leave it alone.
Well, I don't want to go down that because for me, Wally has turned into a bit on social media, a bit of a Bobby Ryan thing. Like philosophically, he's not my kind of player.
Right.
And people get into comparisons and don't you think he does this or he does that? I don't think he really fits in anywhere, to be quite honest with you. Want to go be a cup team. But based on the dynamics, based on part of the trade, I don't feel he really fits in anywhere. I'm not big on smaller players that aren't super dynamic. You could never win with Phil Housley. And Phil, at least on the one dimension, could provide offense for you. And I don't dislike the fella. He is real smart. He's real skilled. Man, he plays with big balls for a little guy. But there's just not quite enough there. But I still think that that's what they're going to go with. I mean, what do? I'm going to go and trade for a guy. Now I'm going to push Brannstrom down. They want to re-sign Mete. I just don't think logically, guys, when you take a step back here, they bought themselves a bit of time. I think that's the opening night 6, but I would hope that next spring Sanderson hops by him. You start to make some other changes, but I don't think that's happening for open night, Ian.
The only thing I wonder too is, do you guys think that Victor Mete will leapfrog Erik Brannstrom on the depth chart? I thought it was interesting when they opened up the 3-on-3 overtime last night. And I know it only lasted 9 seconds, or on Wednesday night. It was Josh Norris, Brady Tkachuk, Victor Mete. Victor Mete was the guy that, anyway, all I'm saying is I think DJ Smith trusts Victor Mete to defend in his own zone more than he does Erik Brannstrom. And I wouldn't be shocked if this turns into a Mike Riley situation where Mike Riley got the trust of the coach. I think Victor Mete will end up having the trust of the coach.
Yeah. And the other part, guys.
I just to add to that, sorry, Simmer, go ahead.
No. I was going to say on Zoom, everyone that's played with us played well. The other part that's going to be different to Ian's point next year, guys, there's no longer going to be organizational stuff in the first couple of games. The coach flat out is going to everybody that's the best player that can help you win, because I think jobs are on the line. Do you know what I mean? So, hey, there's no more of who was part of a trade or anything else. Hey, if Mete he feels is a better player, flat out he'll be playing.
I just get the sense that Mete right now, he just seems like a very confident guy. And I have my doubts early on too. I'm a lot like Simmer in that, and I know I'm biased. I'm not expecting every player to be a 6'3" mutant on the back end that can do whatever. I do think that you need a healthy balance. But I just, and to Ian's point, has Mete leapfrogged Brandstrom on the depth chart? I think he has. I think he's a better defenseman. I don't know that that's consistently what you're going to get out of Victor Mete moving forward. There could be a whole pile of adrenaline here and new motivation that kind of exceeded in his play, and it showed here in this last stretch. But where it stands right now, if I'm making up a team and I got to decide between the two who I want to keep, it's probably Victor Mete. I really like his gap control. I mean, they both work very hard, so don't get me wrong there. But just watching them right now, Mete just seems just a little stronger in his own zone. They're both very small players, but if I have to give an edge to one or the other, it's Mete right now, and I'm not going to change my mind on that. I know, and to touch on Simmer's point about online, I know there's this love affair with Brandstrom. I get it. He's that underdog kind of player that you want to cheer for, that you want to see do very well. He's just a little fella, but I feel like that little fella can get pushed around really easy in the postseason. I know that if I'm a forward and I see a little shrimp fella on the ice, I'm going to go right to him at net front. I'm going to box him out, a lot like what you saw Nick Paul do last night to create room in net front with Hutton. Gets in the way. A guy like Brandstrom can get muscled off the puck very often, and I don't know that he's elite enough in any category, and that's basically plagiarizing what Simmer's been saying online. You got to be excellent in one area if you're going to come on the ice at 5'7". I know, and it hurt Lloydie's feelings on TSN there because he's a little fella as well. But I still firmly believe you need a little bit of size there on the back end. And when you see a little Lloydie skating around in net front, I just want to punt him or throw him somewhere. So that's where I stand on that. I do believe Mete's the better player right now. And sure, I mean, I don't see a whole lot of changes happening in this lineup either. You got Zaitsev making a handful of money, or you can't bury him on that third pairing. So I think you're going to see them start off opening night much like they are right now, and they may make some adjustments throughout the year.
All right. On that note, we are going to have one final question, and that is Pierre Dorion is coming into the final year of his contract. Let's assess his year and what he's been able to accomplish. Simmer, let's start with you and what kind of grade you give Pierre Dorion.
At the end of the day, Wally, you have to any rebuild. Went through this in 2004 with the Washington Capitals, George McPhee. You know what? Amateur scouting may be a separate entity, but at the end of the day, Pierre Dorion's the general manager. Fly to Barbados. I present a plan to the owner. Owner buys in. How I acquire the picks, who I hire, who drafts, that's still part of the general manager. I would say they are not hands down. They are the best drafting and development team in the National Hockey League. When you look at the picks they've hit on, you look at the present, the future, everything that's happening, I give him an A++. Now, when I get back to his initial take as a general manager of trading away Mika Zibanejad, then doing the Duchesne trade in kind of whatever that was, then on as far as the rebuild, outside of the Carlson trade, it hasn't been very good. The acquisitions on the pro side, and go to last offseason, I'd probably give him an F. I mean, Austin Watson, okay. Anybody else got in the way? Stepan was terrible. The Murray contract to Dadonov to everything else. So what would I end up giving him right now? I guess I give him a C+ overall. But I will recognize the most important part of a rebuild, guys, is drafting properly, putting players in place. I got special people in Kachuk and Stutz and Shabbat. I got a bunch of other guys coming. The next phase of this is hoping you learn from last year's offseason. You learn from 4 or 5 years on the job. Now when I go to the next phase of adding pieces, Wally, but some heavy lifting has been done, and there's a lot of credit for that. Pieces are in place right now, but there's not a person in the hockey world that wouldn't love to get a hold of this reserve list. So I say, hey, job well done. But you can't have another offseason. You have to learn from past mistakes. The trading and signing and everything else they do to this roster going forward has to be a whole lot better, but drafting is outstanding.
Yeah, the thing I miss about working with Simmer is in that answer, he gave Pierre Dorion an A++, an F, and then a C plus.
Yeah,
exactly.
He went.
Well, if you follow me, where that's a grade in one area to the other, Ian, and I've meshed up your GPA all together.
Exactly.
About a 2.5.
Yeah, and you know what? And I think I agree with that. I think he comes in somewhere in that C plus range, and he's going into the last year of his contract, and it's going to be interesting. Look, I think the biggest thing about Pierre Dorion, when he said he wanted to make this why not us, why not now, when he first took over, I'll give him credit. He traded for Derek Brassard. They got to the conference final. Methot, you obviously know that. Look, I'll give him credit. He delivered there. When he said I was going to tear this thing down and rebuild, okay, you've gotten to this point. So I get it. But sign Brady Tkachuk, man. Like, sign Brady Tkachuk. Like, this is what it's going to come down to. You let Mark Stone go. You let some other people go. If you can negotiate a deal with Craig Oster, Newport Sports, and get it done with Brady Tkachuk, you'll make me a believer that what's underneath the hood is settled down. If Brady Tkachuk and company are like, I don't know, well, that's going to lead a lot of people to believe that things haven't stabilized. And so that's the hallmark of the Pierre Dorion era. It's been chaos, and it's like a dam that's bursting, and he's tried to, put his hand in 5 different spots. The question is, has the water stopped rushing? And we're going to find out with Brady Tkachuk. So you get Brady Tkachuk done. I think a lot of people are going to say this thing is stabilized and he's the right general manager for the next phase of the rebuild.
Okay, quick question, Mendes. And Simmer, I know you've brought this up before. Is Brady Tkachuk going to get offer sheeted?
I know Simmer played that. Like, look, the offer sheet in the NHL, it's the boogeyman. It's a thing that exists to scare people, but rarely does it come into play. Last time an offer sheet was actually successful and a guy changed teams, Dustin Penner in the summer of 2007, and that almost ended in a barn fight, right, between Brian Burke and Kevin Lowe. Since then, I think there's been 3 other offer sheet attempts that all failed. Sebastian Aho, Ryan O'Reilly, and I want to say Shea Weber. I could be wrong on that. That's it. We've seen some great players that are RFAs have this window where they could, like Braden Point was a classic one a couple of years ago. Remember, people like, oh, someone could leverage Tampa. It never happened. This thing is an old man's club, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And I don't know. I don't see it happening. So I don't want Ottawa fans to panic, but then I'll hand it over to Simmer.
No, and you what got slipped in under those offer sheets at that time was a stupid one that I think Philly gave Kessler right at the same time. So here's a couple of things on an offer sheet, guys. Of course, you don't just give it; it has to be accepted. Okay, so if the New York Rangers gave Brady Tkachuk a crazy offer sheet like Shea Weber, where David Poile just took it all day long, not to mention a cap recapture that could hit him later, how would ownership here in Ottawa feel about having to match it? Does that end up happening? All I said on Brady Tkachuk, Wally, is I wanted to get out in front of it because I was in sick bay, but I didn't want someone to steal it. When I see Mark Messier coming on TV saying, I want to be able to beat you in a street fight, and I know Chris Drury, the way he played, I know the BU connection, you got an owner right now that I think is wild, wild west. The New York Rangers are the last crew, and that's one of the reasons Neil Smith doesn't work in the National Hockey League anymore. They went sideways on Joe Sakic and a lot of other players. If they strike out on Jack Eichel, which I don't think they will right now, he'll get traded. If the Rangers land him, probably doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, my feeling is it could be an option. I look at what they want to create as a hockey team. They want to get away from being soft. And I also look at a situation with the Rangers. Should they present an offer sheet, I don't think they necessarily want to hand over draft picks to Ottawa. And I don't know if Ottawa wants them. I think that's when they'll try to work out trades. They'll try to use some of their young assets, including Ian's good friend Mika Zibanejad. So I just threw it out there because I kind of thought it was a perfect storm if I'm trying to turn the identity of a club. When I got an owner like that who wants to win right now, I don't think he's in the old boys club anymore. I think he's going to do whatever he thinks is best for the New York Rangers, because when you fire a guy the quality of a John Davidson, Wally, and Ian, and and probably Mark, man, oh man, that sends a real signal that you're headed into a pretty crazy time.
It'll be interesting. I look forward to this offseason to see what all will happen. But for now, that is a chat brought to you by Whitewater Brewing. Of course, they offer free delivery to home. And look there, if you go to whitewater.ca, you can get a Wally and Methot coupon for 15% off. Anyway, we're not done with these guys, though. The Sens spectacular continues right after the break. We're going to go 3 for 3 with all these guys, Simmer, Mendes, and Methot, all coming back after the break. You're watching the Wally and Methot Show. Welcome back to the Wally Methot Show. Happy to once again have Mendes and Simmer sitting in for this very special 3 for 3. Boys, here's the, as you know, maybe here's the rules. 3 questions, multiple choice. You give me the best answer. So let's go. Best moment from the 2021 season. That's Joey Decord's first NHL victory. How about Tim Stützle's backyard hat trick celebration? Brady Tkachuk's Frank the Tank goal celebration? Or Artem Anisimov as the E-Bug? Simmer?
You know what? For sure it was Stützle. The other ones were kind of nice, but when you really look at kind of where the franchise is at, we interviewed him last summer. The excitement around him from there to the draft, to the boys, to the World Junior. This guy's Brady Tkachuk 2.0. Not just a great hockey player, a great kid, a lot of energy. And that's one of those things that Ottawa for a while was an international story for all the wrong things. That's another one of those stories that's international. It's nothing but positive for Ottawa. So I'll say the Hats.
Mendes.
First of all, I'm disappointed Pierre Dorion throwing the cup isn't on there because that's probably my favorite moment of the season. I think I love the Artem Anisimov story, and I think that's a big reason why he played in the season finale on Wednesday against Toronto. I think he stepped up in that game in Vancouver, put on the goalie gear when he didn't have to. And you know what? I thought that was really cool. I one of the big regrets I have is I wish that they had let him speak to the media afterwards because it was a great story, but it had its shelf life and it went by, but I love it. And I think having a guy willing to put on goalie gear and potentially be a hair of coming into an NHL game, I love that story with Artie Anisimov.
Meth.
For me, it's simple. I have to go with the Tim Stützle situation with the hat trick and all the kids throwing hats in that backyard. It looked like they were living in a frat house when you saw them all walk out onto the patio in the pajamas. And beyond all the optics of it, I think it's just the timing of it was perfect. You know, I think it's a nice little story right at the end of the year, going into the off season, leaves people with some happy feelings. Everyone's feeling really good about themselves. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I'd like to be different, go against the grain here, but I'm going to go with the hat trick.
Yeah, no, I think the hat throwing celebration certainly took on a life of its own, and well done by the community. It just shows it's a small market team, but it has a huge Sens fan base. And this is a group that really starts to rally around this team. And so it is underappreciated outside of the city. All right. Which player are you most excited to see next season? Jacob Bernard-Docker, Alex Formenton, Shane Pinto, or Philip Gustafsson? Mendes, we'll start with you.
Ooh, give me Alex Formenton. You know what? I really like what Formenton brought to the table on the penalty kill. And I think if you give this guy significant penalty kill reps, he reminds me of like Andreas Athanasiou. Every time Ottawa would play him a couple of years ago, he was good for a breakaway a game. And he didn't bury them all the time, but it's like Formenton to me. I think he can come in. I think he can score between 10 and 15 goals next season. I really do. And I think I'd love to see this guy in a playoff series because he's got a little bit of an agitating factor to him too. So I'm super excited to see Formenton in the lineup on a regular basis next year.
Who did we have, Wally? It was Bernard-Docker.
Formenton, Pinto, and Gustafsson.
Oh, boy. No, it's interesting because I had in the back of my mind old Timmy Stützle we just talked about.
That's too easy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll go with Bernard-Docker, probably start in Belleville. I like Formenton. I hope the rest of the game kind of catches up with him. But I really think for Pinto, man, you come in, you get that little bit of time, look great early, kind of blend it in a little bit. But that comfort level, as you know, Meth, to have come in and felt what it's all about, go back in the summer. There's a spot for him probably on the team, regardless of what happens in the offseason. I think we could see a real step. And if you see a challenge in training camp as it sits right now, even though we talked about Logan Brown, I think that might be his spot to lose with Stützle and Connor Brown. So I'll say Shane Pinto.
Matt.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I'd like to think that, and I'm a defenseman by nature, I'm going to want to lean towards JBD. And I know a lot of people have suggested that he'll be in the minors. I still think he can play at this level right now, but I don't want to rush him either. I'm torn here. Selfishly, I want to watch this young fella come up here and just make some noise and play well. He was so positionally sound in these NHL games that it's hard to believe he'll go down, but he probably will. I'm curious. I'm going to be following him. I could pick an NHL ready guy right now, but I'm going to stick with JBD. I love what he's brought to the game. I couldn't imagine coming in at that age and playing with so much poise under the gun like he has, fresh out of college. So I'm excited for him and what he has moving forward. I like his play. He's so good in his own zone. He plays with a lot of poise. He hangs on to pucks, doesn't just shoot it away like a grenade like I did when I was 20, getting a call up. He takes that extra second to make the play. Got a lot of admiration for that maturity for his age.
I think Philip Gustafson gets overlooked because Anton Forsberg is signed to a deal, but I don't see that he will finish the year anywhere near. It may even be gone in the summer if you think about it. And that is, you might see Philip Gustafson as the backup next season.
It's a crapshoot. There's too many goalies, Wally. You don't even know where to begin there.
Okay, final question. How many wins will the Sens have next season? You got less than 25, 25, 30, 30 to 35, or more than 35. Meth, let's start with you.
So does that mean I have to start doing math? Because you're asking the wrong guy.
The Sens haven't had more than 30 wins, I think, in the last 4 seasons. I'm
going to dumb it down for myself. Okay. And I'm going to say that I believe they're just going to be on the outside looking in. That might sound like a very basic, vague, easy answer.
Wasn't one of the
I don't care. I'm changing the question. So my point is, I think they're going to be pushing. I do think they're going to go through a bit of a struggle early on next year. I think the expectation level right now is unreasonable. And I think with the pressure and actually playing in some meaningful game, in perhaps an Atlantic division. So now you're playing against the Panthers, you're playing against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The travel's a little different. You've got a bunch of kids in their sophomore years. I don't see them getting into the playoffs just yet, but I'm hopeful that they'll be trending in that right direction and that you'll see them just outside looking in with more learning behind them.
Simmer.
You know what? I'll say they're going to go 35 and 12. So I'll say 35. They're going to get 82 points, need 93 to make the playoffs. But that, to me, realistically, they'll be somewhere in the 80s, Wally. As to how many loser points or how many ties or whatever shootout losses they'll end up being, I'm not sure. But I think they'll be a 500 hockey team. So just either at 35 or just a tad north of it.
Simmer stole my answer. I was going to go 30. I was going to say they were going to go 36, 36, and 10.
Can you and Mark get some original content after I go?
Yeah, seriously. But you know what? I look at them and I think if you put them back into the Atlantic Division, which is where I think they're going to be, I think they finish ahead of Buffalo. I think they finish ahead of Detroit, and I think they finish ahead of Montreal. But I just don't see a scenario right now, and things could change, right? Tampa may lose some players in the expansion draft or the cap crunch. I don't see any scenario where they finish ahead of Tampa, Toronto, Florida, or Boston right now. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel. And so I'm with you guys. Somewhere in that 75 to 85 point range feels about right, but that's still a tangible step forward. I just don't want them to be a huge seller at the trade deadline. Like, to me, if Ottawa can get to the trade deadline and they're not a lock it in seller that you're like, they're still in the mix, then I think it's a successful season.
All right. Well, this was a successful 3 for 3. I appreciate you guys playing along and better at answering than Meth is, and at least you guys listen to the questions. We'll be right back after this. All right, guys, it's great to see you back, both of you. Simmer, nice to hear you back on the radio as always. Yeah. And of course, Mendes, your athletic stories this season have been outstanding. So is it good to get back together, the two of you, like Maverick and Goose?
Oh, it feels very good. I've actually done the whole show with no pants on. And to be quite honest, it's very rousing.
Me too.
I know how to make Ian feel awkward even on a podcast.
Yeah. No, it is great to be back. And I think people who know how much I loved working with Simmer, and that it was never our choice. When we got broken up, it was never our choice, right? At least that's what I'm saying publicly. Simmer's going to find out that I went to management. No, but we did. We loved working together. So even being able to come back and do this on a podcast, it's what did you say, Maverick and Goose?
Yeah.
It's like a Maverick and Goose type of situation.
Yeah, Hall and Oates, just Sonny and Cher. All those great duos.
Crockett and Tubbs.
Exactly.
Boys, always a pleasure. We'll do it again for the second annual Wally Methot Sens season finale super spectacular special. Take care, my friends. See you later.
Cheers, boys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
That is the chat with our good friends Ian and Simmer. It's brought to you by Whitewater Brewing. Whitewater delivers beer right to your door, and they're offering exclusive savings to Wally and Methot listeners. Shop whitewater.ca and use the Wally Methot for 15% off coupon. Must be 19 years of age or older. Time now for On the Points, brought to you by sportsinteraction.com. Sports Interaction is Canada's odds makers. Head over to sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Methot today to get in on the action. You must be 19 years of age or older. Okay, Meth, Stanley Cup playoffs are starting. I want to know, let's just get right to it. We're going to skip through all the rounds, get right to who's your Stanley Cup favorite.
This was a hard one for me. I'm torn between a few teams. I know I was a big promoter for the Toronto Maple Leafs for most of the season, which is very hard for me to do. But after paying more attention to the West, honestly, I think that's where all the direction has to go. I think it's between the Avs and the Knights. And right now, based off the way I'm seeing these teams playing on these last stretches, I think, for me at least, I'm going with the Colorado Avalanche. I know I was leaning on Vegas as well early on, but I'm switching my picks now going into the postseason, and I'm picking the Colorado Avalanche. They have a ton of skill. They've got a ton of pace to their game. They're reminiscent of the late 2000s Detroit Red Wings, where they would just overwhelm you with waves of offense. I think you're going to see that with Colorado. I got high hopes for them.
Wow, you've gone completely rogue. So I thought for sure you were going to say Vegas, as you've done for a lot. You've really honed in on them. Of course, you're good.
I've played for them.
Stone. I don't think you're now going to be allowed to go to the wedding. And of course, you do have your Stein Vegas Golden Knights jersey. Boy, so since you tipped Colorado, which was I'm gonna mix it up. Then I'm gonna take Vegas. Perhaps their goaltending will be enough because of the way they play with both Leonard and with Marc-Andre Fleury, and their defense. I think it's overlooked a lot. So. You know what? I'm going to take Vegas as the favorite to win. So, all right, we got Colorado and Vegas. We'll see how this all plays out. Now, let's skip over, let's say the top 6 and look further down. If you're going to make a bet on a underdog play, who do you go after?
So initially, I'd love to pick a team way up here in the north that I could kind of get behind. And that would have been Winnipeg, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I just know that with Connor McDavid's dominance over that team and the lack of defense and depth on the Winnipeg Jets, I got to stay far away from that. I'm not touching that right now. I'm too scared. So I'm going to go with the Florida Panthers. I know everyone thinks, why the Florida Panthers? You're going against the Tampa Bay Lightning. What are you thinking? I've got a feeling, and I know they're a pretty well-rounded team. They've made some noise this year. They've been pretty successful, and it's quite frankly just very hard when I'm looking at my bracket to find a clear-cut upset that really stands out to me. So right now, if I'm going to put anything anywhere, I'm going to put my money on the Florida Panthers. I just like the makeup of the team. They may get swept, and I'll be wrong here, but I like the numbers. I like where they're at statistically there throughout the last year.
Well, one of the things, it's rare that all the top seeds make it to the Stanley Cup Final Four. And so there's always some upset. So while I don't know if I'm fully on board with my pick, I'm going to go with the New York Islanders. I've liked them all season, and I know they battled through some injuries. I think Barry Trotz can get it done. I think he can find a way to win, but boy, Pittsburgh looks really good right now. So I'm just going to go out and say the New York Islanders. If there's a team I got to pick, it's the Islanders to upset the Penguins. This will probably be the worst pick I've ever had, but we will go with Florida and the New York Islanders as the upsets in round 1. Now,
with zero confidence, by the way.
No, there's none whatsoever. And finally, is that let's stick in the north and let's go with the first round. So Montreal and Toronto in that big rivalry first round, and then there's Edmonton playing Winnipeg. So Montreal, Toronto. It seems like a mismatch. I'm not sure how many people are going to pick Montreal, but what do you got?
I loved Montreal halfway through the year. I'll say this, but they're limping into the playoffs right now. And so if someone's going to come to me and say it's going to be a tight series, man, I'd be surprised if they got 2 wins. And I mean this. I like Toronto in 5 games, possibly 6. If for somehow, some way, the Montreal Canadiens can get some stellar goaltending out of Carey Price, but they're just banged up. Everyone's hurt, right? So between leaning on Jake Allen and Brendan Gallagher being out, Shea Weber being hurt, I know a bunch of them I'm sure will magically appear here going into this postseason next week, but I don't like it right now. I'm very nervous to touch it. So I'm going to stick with Toronto in 5 games.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to throw something at you. I think you're probably safe picking Toronto, but does their goaltending not concern you a little? Like if you're going to win in the postseason, you win 1-0, 2-1. These easy.
Sure.
So Montreal just has to find a way to get a goal.
Okay. Well, who's okay, and that's fair. But what answer do you have for basically 3 of Toronto's lines as far as defense goes on the Montreal Canadiens? I mean, there's no one there right now, and everyone's banged up. So they will. I at least don't believe that they'll have an answer for that. I think it's just going to be overwhelming pressure of coming from Toronto, and it'll come at them in waves. And if they don't get them in 5 games here, I think I think people will genuinely be surprised. I think that's the expectation level right now.
Okay, does Toronto feel the pressure from within, though?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, they need to get past this elusive first round win, right? And we all know that. But I just think right now, Toronto's makeup is so much different from the prior seasons. They've made leaps and bounds on their goals against. They've rounded off their D. Mind you, there is a chink in the armor here. And I think if you could find that little hole in Toronto's Death Star, if you will, it'll be their PK. Their PK hasn't really improved that much. I believe they finished around 22 in the league this year. So I have my concerns there, but we all know in the postseason, teams tend to tighten up a little bit more and take a lot less dumb penalties. So if Toronto can remain disciplined, just play 5-on-5 hockey and rely on their offense, they're going to be laughing.
Their power play is not any better either. It's one, right? They've been terrible down the stretch here. So I will think that Toronto's going to do this just based on the lack of depth for the Montreal Canadiens. But boy, there's something about that makes it seem really intriguing of the underdog Montreal Canadiens are going to come in and surprise. Finally, the Edmonton Winnipeg, you kind of alluded to it. I remember a long time ago, Curtis Lezizian came into Ottawa and said, you can't back your way into the playoffs. If you're not playing well going into the playoffs, you can't flick the switch and just turn it on. And I think Winnipeg is in a world of trouble.
Yeah, and I worry. And again, this was another team, and I don't say this lightly, legitimately, the way they were made up, at least, a team at the start of the year that I thought, okay, this is going to be trouble for some of these other clubs. I liked the way they played against Montreal early on when Montreal was doing very well. Winnipeg seemed to have an answer to them. But right now, you just mentioned it. You said it, Wally. They're not playing well. And if you're crawling into that postseason with not a lot of confidence, I'm not a huge fan of the makeup of their decor. I just don't see it. I know that McDavid's been feasting on them. He is McJesus against the Winnipeg Jets. I just don't see it happening. They're too deep up front, especially. And if you can get some really solid goaltending out of Mike Smith, who is a dinosaur at this point, but I respect the heck out of him. He's been playing fantastic for them. I mean, unless Hellebuck can stand on his head, I don't see Winnipeg coming out of this. So I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. To me, that's a confident number. I got to give Winnipeg the benefit that they may steal a couple, but otherwise it's Edmonton's series to lose.
No, and it always seems to come down to goaltending. So I guess we'll watch to see how that plays out. But the consensus is in for the Wally Methot show. We are taking Toronto and Edmonton. We're just going to stick to the favorites. We don't like to veer off very much. Those are the picks. That is On the Points, brought to you by sportsinteraction.com/Wally and Methot. Sports Interaction is Canada's odds maker. Must be 19 or older to play. Odds subject to change. Wally and Methot show will be right back after this. All right, let's get on to Trivial Trivia, shall we? Presented by gongshow.com. Lifestyle hockey apparel. Head on over to gongshow.com and look in on the spring and summer collection. All right, Craig, what do you got?
Okay, so we're going to go back to, so we got a Gong Show sauce-off kit to give away from last show with Brandon Pruss. And we asked, who did Brandon Pruss say he wished he had the chance to fight in his career? And like an absolute crazy person, he decided to pick Zdeno Chara. So stick taps to everyone who got that one, but particularly at @C_habits on Twitter. Chris, we're going to be reaching out to you in your DMs to figure out how to get you your Gong Show sauce-off kit. Hey, didn't win that one. That's too bad. Guess what? We got more up for grabs today. We're going to visit on over to the Wally and Methot show shop. And up for grabs today, we got one of the beautiful mugs, as well as a t-shirt of your choice from the Wally and Methot show shop. Shop.wallyandmethot.com. And today's question, since it was a beauty with Ian and Shawn, we're gonna go a little more trivia this time around, and we're gonna ask a simple question. So if you know the answer to this, which is over the past decade, which Sens defenseman leads the team in plus minus, head on over to Twitter and shoot us your answer using the hashtag Wally and Methot. Contest closes Sunday, May 16 at noon Eastern, and we're gonna reveal the winner on our next show on Monday.
What's the website?
It is shop.wallyandmethot.com. I screwed up earlier?
No,
We're just plugging it a lot.
Yeah, no.
Shop.wallyandmethot.com.
Perfect. Great stuff. And if you like our show, please like and subscribe on YouTube. And of course, you can watch us on or listen to us on podcasts like Apple, Spotify, and Google. Thanks again to our sponsors, Bonnechere Excavating, Whitewater Brewery. Of course, we've got Sports Interaction and Gong Show. I appreciate all your time. And Meth, I think as we like to say, the show was well done. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching the Wally Methot Show.
Jeez.